Alina had always been there, but rarely seen. At least not really. She walked the halls of Silvergrove High like a shadow, quiet, careful, nearly invisible. Most students didn't know her name. Some knew her only as the cleaner's daughter. Her mother, Mrs. Ronnie, had worked at the school for nearly 10 years, mopping floors, wiping down windows, and picking up after others' carelessness. She did it with grace, with a quiet dignity that often went unnoticed. Alina would sometimes help after classes, especially when her mother was tired. That's how many teachers began to associate her with the janitorial work, not with the students. A presence at the edge of things, Silvergrove was not a cruel school, but it was careless in the way comfortable places often are. Students came from middle-class families, some from wealthier backgrounds. The latest sneakers, expensive backpacks, and new phones were common sights. Alina didn't have those. She wore the same 2 or 3 sets of clothes throughout the week. Her shoes were scuffed and her notebooks were second-hand, pages already curled at the corners before she even wrote in them. Teachers rarely called on her in class. Other students didn't mock her openly, but the whispers were there, subtle, sharp, and unkind in the way teenagers can be without thinking. Talent Teaser Day was an informal event held every term, a chance for students to showcase their hidden talents. There were singers, a few break dancers, a magician with a deck of cards, and someone who brought in a python for a pet tricks demonstration. Everyone clapped politely, laughed, and enjoyed the show. The mood was light, teasing, playful. Then came the moment. Mr. Kapoor, one of the more sarcastic teachers, had noticed Alina standing off to the side in the crowd. She wasn't a participant, just watching, as always. Something in the way she hovered at the edge must have sparked an impulse in him. Why don't you go next, Alina? He called out. Got any secret talents? A few students chuckled. It wasn't a cruel laugh, but it wasn't kind either. They didn't expect her to respond. Alina looked up, startled. Her instinct was to shake her head and step back. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the exhaustion on her mother's face that morning, or the sound of guitar strings she'd heard in her head since she was a child. Music had been her only escape. Her mother had once owned a guitar, a gift from a long-lost friend in college, but she'd pawned it during a hard year. They got another second-hand one later after much saving, and Alina had taught herself using old YouTube videos and scraps of printed chords from the library. She didn't respond to Mr. Kapoor. She just walked forward. A few more students giggled, assuming she was playing along. The guitar on the stage was one of the school's old, slightly out of tune, and rarely touched. She picked it up, cradled it in her lap, and adjusted the tuning pegs like she had done hundreds of times at home. That was the first moment when people began to notice something was different. She wasn't fumbling. Her hands knew exactly what to do. Still, no one expected much. Then she started playing. It wasn't flashy. There were no dramatic finger taps or rock star strums. It was simple, a fingerstyle melody, delicate and haunting. Her fingers moved like they were telling a secret, drawing the room into something it hadn't prepared for. The laughter stopped. Conversation died down. Students leaned forward. Teachers straightened in their seats. Alina didn't look up. She focused on the music, her fingers dancing over the frets, the sound warm and full despite the worn-out instrument. Every note felt intentional, like it carried something, a memory, a story, a part of her that words had never been allowed to share. That performance wasn't just about musical skill. It was about being seen fully and completely for the first time. In that moment, everything they had assumed about her shattered quietly, piece by piece. She wasn't the background girl, the cleaner's daughter, the one who didn't belong. She was an artist. She was powerful in her silence. The same students who had dismissed her now sat in awe. The same teachers who had never noticed her name now saw her soul through her fingertips. It was the perfect underdog story unfolding not in some scripted movie, but in real time. And what made it even more striking was that Alina had never asked for it. She hadn't come to prove anything. She had lived in the margins because that's where she had been placed, not because she lacked ability. The assumption that a girl from a working-class background, especially one tied so visibly to a janitor's uniform, couldn't hold. Exceptional talent was so deeply ingrained that her mere act of playing beautifully became revolutionary. This is the essence of the underdog theme, not just someone who wins despite the odds, but someone who reveals that the odds themselves were unfairly constructed. Alina didn't overcome her background. She didn't have to. Her background wasn't the problem. The problem was that everyone else saw it as one. As her final note rang out and faded into silence. The entire room sat motionless for a second, as if unsure of how to react. Then applause broke out, awkward at first, then genuine, then thunderous. Even Mr. Kapoor clapped, his expression unreadable. A few students stood. Alina didn't smile or bow. She just nodded once, gently placed the guitar down, and walked off the stage as quietly as she had arrived. In the days that followed, everything changed, and yet nothing did. People started to greet her more. A few students asked if she'd give them lessons. Teachers remembered her name. Her mother cried quietly at night, not out of sadness, but because someone had finally seen her daughter the way she always had. But Alina stayed the same. She still wore the same shoes, still helped clean after school, still walked the halls with that quiet presence. What had changed wasn't her. It was the narrative. The underdog is not just someone at the bottom who fights to reach the top. Sometimes it's the person we never even thought to look at, the one we place beneath notice, whose greatness only shocks us because of our own ignorance. Alina didn't rise. She simply stood still long, enough for others to realize they were the ones looking in the wrong direction all along. It started as a moment no one expected to mean anything. Just a passing suggestion made in jest, a half-serious dare tossed into the air like a crumpled paper ball. When Mr. Kapoor casually pointed toward Alina, asking if she wanted to give the guitar a try, most people thought he was joking. And in truth, he was. Alina had been standing by the door of the auditorium, quiet as usual, a small notebook in her hands. She wasn't on the list of performers. She never was. She never spoke, unless spoken to, and even then, her replies were soft, careful, measured. No one had ever seen her raise her hand in class, let alone step on a stage. That day, the auditorium was buzzing with the kind of energy that comes from light-hearted competition, a dance performance, a beatboxer, a magic trick gone wrong. Laughter came easily, the kind that floated and echoed, harmless and unthinking. So, when someone suggested Alina try the guitar, the laughter followed, not with cruelty, but with the assumption that there was no way she'd take it seriously. She was the cleaner's daughter, the quiet girl, the one no one remembered being. Introduced to but something in her eyes flickered, not with anger, not even embarrassment. It was closer to resolve, like the ignition of something long buried. Without a word, she stepped forward. She walked past rows of students and teachers, her footsteps silent against the polished floor. She moved like someone who knew she didn't belong there, but had accepted it so deeply that she didn't need permission anymore. When she reached the stage, no one said anything. No one stopped her. Curiosity had dulled their instinct to mock. The guitar leaned against the wall like an afterthought, unused, one of those old-school instruments barely tuned and mostly forgotten. She picked it up and tested the strings. Her hands moved with confidence, a kind of quiet familiarity that made a few students sit up straighter. They exchanged glances. No one had ever seen Alina touch a guitar, much less play one. And yet, her fingers found the pegs, twisted them just slightly, and ran a soft chord. It wasn't quite right, yet. She made a few more adjustments. Then she looked down, closed her eyes, and began. The first note was simple. Clear, clean, haunting. It floated out into the air, more echo than sound, but it carried weight, not just in volume, but in meaning. Her fingers moved in a pattern that told a story. Not one from a music book, not a song copied from the radio, but something personal. something built from memory and experience. The rhythm was gentle, unhurried. The melody wrapped around the room like warm light creeping through the cracks of a dark room. It held attention, demanded silence. A few teachers leaned forward, brows raised, eyes locked on her hands. Students who had been whispering stopped mid-sentence. No one had expected this, not even close. Alina didn't just play the guitar, she spoke through it. Each note seemed to have a purpose, every transition between chords carefully crafted, filled with emotion, memory, and intention. She wasn't performing. She was revealing something. Vulnerability, sadness, resilience, all of it was in the music, woven into the strings like truth set free. People began to remember small things. How she was often seen sitting alone under the trees during lunch. How she never wore headphones, but always seemed lost in thought. How her eyes often drifted, as if following a song no one else could hear. It all made sense now. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't random. Alina had been carrying this music inside her for years. No one had noticed because no one had ever looked beyond what they assumed about her. And in this one moment, she had chosen to let it out, not with a speech, not with anger, but with beauty so raw and undeniable that it left no room for mockery. She moved through the melody like a river finding its course, her timing perfect, her phrasing emotional but never indulgent. Even the flaws, the occasional buzz of a string, the slight hesitation at a difficult transition, only made it feel more human, more alive. Her eyes remained closed the whole time, not because she was afraid to see the crowd, but because she didn't need them. She wasn't playing for applause. She was playing for release. Then, just as gently as it began, the music ended. Her fingers slowed, the final chord ringing into the silence like the fading light at dusk. She opened her eyes and looked at the guitar for a moment, as if letting go of a part of herself. Then she stood, placed it down carefully, and turned. To leave the stage, no flourish, no bow, no smile. Just a return to who she had always been. The silence in the room was louder than any applause. For several seconds, no one moved. It wasn't because they were unsure whether to clap. It was because they were still processing what they had just witnessed. Some performances impress, others entertain. But this had transformed the room. It had shifted the energy, cracked open the collective perception of a single girl, and by extension, the assumptions people make about each other every day. Then the applause came. First from one student, then two, then a wave of clapping that felt more like a thank you. Then a celebration. Some students stood. A few teachers wiped their eyes discreetly. Even Mr. Kapoor, who had made the initial joke, clapped slowly, eyes lowered in what might have been regret or respect. Maybe both. From that day on, Alina's name was not forgotten, not because she demanded attention, not because she sought praise, but because when the moment came, the moment meant to make her small, she didn't shrink. She expanded. She filled the room with something so unexpected and so beautiful that the joke turned on itself. And everyone in that auditorium was left not just stunned, but changed. Alina never mentioned the performance afterward. She continued helping her mother clean classrooms after school. She still wore the same worn-out shoes and sat quietly in the back of the class, but something had shifted. Not in how she behaved, but in how people saw her. They watched now. They listened. They remembered. And all it took was a guitar and the courage to play what was already inside her.